Started with a word of prayer, if we could. Father in heaven, we thank you so much for this day. Thank you for the sunshine and just the beautiful weather today. Pray that you would just bless our time together as we talk about just a really a difficult topic, Lord. I pray that you would just guide us through it. I pray that your presence would be with us, and I just pray that that we would connect in community here and leave here even more connected than when we came in. So we thank you for that, and we present this day to you. In your name we pray. Amen. Well, welcome to our Hope for Mental Health community. I'm Pastor Todd Olthoff, and so I am pastor of pastoral care here at Saddleback, and so it's great to have you here to talk about teen anxiety and depression today. A couple of things as we get started. We have a number of resources here for you today. A couple of things. We've got food over on the side there, so feel free to get some snacks and all of that. Once you're done with the snacks, you're probably going to know where the bathrooms are, another very important thing that everybody asks about. So we give you a little exercise. So you go all the way down to the bottom, and in the corner there at the very bottom are where the bathrooms are, okay? Kind of in that zone. And so if you just walk down those stairs, you'll run right into them, and you'll keep walking, and then you'll walk all the way up, and then you'll be hungry, and the food's right there by the door. So it's perfect. We got you covered. All right, all the way around. A few resources I want to point out to you. We have our Celebrate Recovery table back there on the side. And so if you have any interest in more information on CR, we have that over there. We also have a table of resources over there, too, along the window with QR codes. We all know how those work now, where you can just scan the code. It'll take you right to Amazon where the book is. And if you like the book, you can then order it and have it shipped right to you. We have prayer in the very back corner. You see Leanne waving her hand over there. So if you need prayer, we've got a team of folks that would love to pray with you. And so that's available as well in the corner. We also have a first-timers table. So if you're new with us, we've got a table over there with Jim, who's manning that. So we would love to get to know you and help you get connected if you're sitting by yourself or whatever. We've got a group there for you as well. Another thing I just wanted to point out is you'll notice there's a little sheet in the middle of your table where you can give us your information. That's not because we're going to, call you or sell anything to you or we're doing some kind of study or anything like that. What that's for is to put you on our list to let you know when our next mental health community is and the topics and things that we cover, right? Because it's hard to find it on the website sometimes. Am I right? Yeah, we got a lot of stuff happening here. This way, it'll come right to your inbox. You'll know what we're covering. You'll know when it is, all of those details. If you just leave us your name and email address, we'll make sure we put you on that list to get you all of that information. All right? So we want to get you talking to each other a little bit. And so if you just turn into your tables and just share together what's one thing you hope to get out of our time here today. Okay? Just spend some time talking, and we'll pull you back in a little bit. Go for it.
I've heard the news, I have felt the crimes, I've counted up the numbers, I've crossed the battle line, and I have smelled the hatred. Those that aren't the same, and I pointed my own fingers, but I'm not clear of blame.
some salt, please? Yeah, this one. This one.
Though we sometimes need to fight, may joy come in the morning.
Thank you.
May darkness find a light.
All right, let me pull you guys back in here. Love to hear all the chatter as everybody's getting to know each other a little bit. So what we're going to do right now is we have a testimony from Christy McNichols, who's going to come up and share her story with us. So please welcome her as she comes up.
Hi, it is, it's a privilege to be here today. I know we all have a story. We wouldn't be here if we didn't have a story to tell. So as I have this opportunity to share with my story with you, my testimony, I want to just be able to say, first of all, I've got like pages of notes. I don't know where it's all going to go. We'll see. I will keep the time in mind. Do we have a clock? Okay. Someone tell me if I'm going too long. Okay. But as I was preparing and in my head a lot this week trying to think about what it is I wanted to say, I think one of the things that kept coming to mind is remembering and knowing how it feels to be out there and coming to these groups with all different stories, all different backgrounds, all different phases and parts of the journey with depression and anxiety or different mental health conditions and disorders, and sometimes feeling like, I don't want to hear another Bible study verse or something like that. I just want the information that's going to tell me it's going to be okay. I want the tips, the things, the strategies, the tactics that are going to make my kids better. So, and that's valid. That's right, and that's why April's here. She'll be the one to do that. But I have to say that, one, I'm not the expert, so while I certainly have some information and I've learned a lot in the journey, I do want to speak to our hearts, to our minds, because we're, especially speaking to the loved ones, the parents, the siblings, whoever it is, this is a hard journey. And you know it, I know it. We feel, we see, we hear everything that our loved ones are experiencing. And we so desperately want to encourage and support and help make everything better. And you will. I have a firm conviction that because God has brought this teen into your life, he will equip you. But one of the hardest things is that part of that equipping is that we draw near to God. And I know Kay has said that. I know Todd has said that. We have so many people who have led the way. And so I felt like what God was putting on my heart to once again say, draw near to God in this process. because that is what will sustain you. The education, the learning, everything that we need so desperately, grab onto it, grab hold of it, learn. But in the process, draw near to God, because that He is the one that will sustain us through the process. And I'm here to tell you that He has sustained me. And I'll tell you a little bit about my story and what He has sustained me through. When my husband and I were first married, one of our life verses became Jeremiah 17:7-8. It says, "Blessed is the man or woman who trusts in the Lord, whose trust is the Lord. She is like a tree planted by water that sends out its roots by the stream and does not fear when the heat comes, for its leaves remain green, and is not anxious in the year of drought, for it does not cease to bear fruit." When my husband and I chose those verses, he was a pastor. We were headed for the mission field, and I was like, on it. This is me. This is my life. I trust God. There's a similar passage in Psalms 1 that says, those of us who meditate on the law of the Lord are like that tree planted by the stream who bears fruit. And in my young, like we all do, I kind of thought I had it figured out. Like, this is what I do. This is what I trust God. I'm going to go to the mission field, and I'm going to bear so much fruit. And it was exciting, and that's a good vision to have. That is a godly vision to have. But sometimes along the way, we realize that the plans that we have are not necessarily plans that God has for us. So we fast forward 10 years later, and we have left the mission field. We have 2 adopted kids who we adopted as infants. And I'm a stay-at-home mom who homeschools, not part of the plan. I decided to homeschool because my son had Tourette's syndrome, and what at the time we thought was really extreme ADHD, years later realizing it was a high-functioning autism spectrum disorder. And my daughter had really high social anxiety, which we also now know was rooted in high-functioning autism. And so I was homeschooling, but I was getting really restless. And I kept arguing with God, like, really? Is this the fruit that you wanted me to bear with 2 kids? Again, I was really struggling and wrestling with God and understanding my identity and my purpose and so forth, and just accepting what God had for me. So I stopped homeschooling, which I don't know that was a wrong decision, but it's the decision that I made. And I got involved in ministry. We weren't living in Orange County at the time. I got back engaged, was leading. Ministry life was going good. But my family was falling apart. My son's meltdowns had turned into rages. My daughter was completely shutting down because she was becoming, not only having anxiety, but she was becoming depressed. And I got a text from her best friend's mother that my daughter was talking about suicide. So my daughter was in junior high, and my son was early high school by about this point. And I was really frustrated, perplexed, confused, and I directed a lot of my anger towards my husband, actually, because we had an agreement that he was going to be part of holding the family together. He was a teacher, super involved in his school, but we had this agreement that he was going to fill in some of the gaps because I was working. And that was because he was at the beginning stages of what we found out to be young onset Alzheimer's and frontotemporal dementia. So here I was with a husband with dementia, young onset, and 2 kids on the autism spectrum disorder with depression, anxiety, and all sorts of things. Tourette's, whatever. So a few different diagnoses. So in that time, I had to let go of everything out of a complete sense of desperation. And I do what we do as parents and what we should do. I dropped everything, I let go, and I just became the provider for the family, and I did everything I could to help my family and to be there for them and to learn and to understand. But I didn't get that beautiful story that we all think of when you hear of people having hardships, where my kids just became really mature and they did well in school, and they took care of their dad, and they did the housework when I was at work, and, no Hallmark movie there. No, my neurodivergent teens became consumed by grief, depression, and anxiety. They vacillated between complete shutdowns and isolation or meltdowns. My daughter developed an eating disorder. She had 5 suicide attempts, 2 of which were lethal. She ran away for 5 days. And we had an unplanned pregnancy and an open adoption during that time. And that was a period of about 4.5 years. I will say that it's gotten better. My daughter's therapist always told me, if she hangs in there until she's in her adult years, it will get better because her brain will be better connected. And it has gotten much better. It's not like that anymore. So as I threw myself into working full-time and caring for my family and trying to figure all of this out, I had to, thankfully, I am so thankful that I had a relationship with Jesus already. I don't know how people go through stuff like this without Jesus. But Jesus met me there, in those moments where I felt completely trapped and surrounded. And I didn't necessarily always feel happy or feel good, but Jesus met me in those moments. And there was a deep wrestling with God. And how could I, as a person who had committed my life to follow him in such a way that I was bringing others to relationship with him, why was I not having the fruit that was described in Jeremiah 17? I had to continue to let go and practicing letting go, practicing emptying my hands. And I shouldn't say had to. I do. I have to daily. Empty my hands of anything that I might be holding on to that might be getting in the way of me receiving what it is that God has for me. My friends used to try to encourage me and say, oh man, you're going to have a beautiful story of, your kids are just going to turn it around and they're going to have this great testimony of how God brought them through this. And I hope and pray they do. I still have hope that they might be up here standing up here someday testifying to the power of God at work in their lives. And maybe a little shout out to their mom. But I don't know that that's going to happen. That's not the guarantee with mental illness, with anxiety and depression. My daughter has gone almost 4 years without a suicide attempt, and I celebrate it every time another year goes by and we haven't had an attempt. But I don't know how it's going to turn out. But what I do know is that God is bringing the fruit that he said he would bring into my life. Opportunities like today are part of that. But what it is he directed me as I wrestled with God and cried my heart out to him day by day and continue to do that. What he showed me is that the fruit that he has for me in my life is described in Galatians, the fruit of the Spirit. And, oh goodness, did I not print that? Oh, there it is, good, because I probably would mess it up. I tried to speak from memory. If you're new to church, if you're new to the Bible, fruit is a metaphor that Scripture uses to describe the good things that come out of our lives, the things that glorify God. In Galatians 5:22, the fruit of the Spirit is listed as love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And this is where I find my inspiration, because these are the fruit that God says are mine. He didn't guarantee a ministry with worldwide impact or whatever it is I thought I was going to have. But these fruit that are described in Galatians are ours no matter what the circumstances are in our lives. And the longer I live life, the more I realize that these are the fruit that I want more of. Yes, I want my children to become healthy. And I should say my husband did pass away in 2021, as would have been expected with dementia. But I'm so excited that I can have more love. I can have more peace. I can have more patience. Trust in God, despite dementia, despite autism, despite anxiety and depression, has led it to an increase in the fruit of the Spirit in my life. First, faithfulness, patience, self-control, gentleness, kindness, and love. Then peace and goodness. And now joy is increasing. And I'm reading Choose Joy. And while these fruits glorify God and bless others, I am also blessed by them. With the presence of these fruit in my life internally, they are part of me and they bless me in turn. So I encourage you that no matter where you're at in this journey with depression and anxiety or any other mental illnesses, to hold tightly to what you do know. That no matter what, with trust in God, you can be like a tree planted by a stream with deep roots, whose leaves are green and do not wither and will not cease to bear fruit.
Hi, everybody. If I haven't met you, I'm Kay Warren, and I'm glad that you are here this weekend, this month with us for the Hope for Mental Health community. Two things I want to say. Did you mention the cards, and I was like zoning out when you mentioned them? Okay, on your table, I mean, not that I would ever zone out when Pastor Todd is talking, but theoretically, on your table there are little 3x5 cards. So if you have a question as our speaker is presenting or anything comes up, that you can write your question on that. We'll collect them at the end of the next group time, and then during our Q&A time, we will try to address those questions. So we'll remind you of that a couple times, but just be listening, and if there's something that you'd like to ask, write it on that card. And the other thing I wanted to say is, sometimes when we're here, we can get triggered. We can find ourselves getting anxious by what's being said or just not feeling good inside. And just want you to know you don't have to try to just hold that all through this time. If you're feeling like you could really use a little extra, either a prayer or somebody to just kind of walk with you, help you contain what you're feeling. In the back corner, as Pastor Todd said, is our prayer warriors, our amazing prayer folks are, but there will also, just showing up back there, we will make sure that come alongside and listen and just provide anything that you need, even as we're going right now. And if you are here as a student today, welcome. If you are a parent or a grandparent or an aunt or uncle or somebody, welcome. And, I just got to thinking, you might not be the parent or you might not have a young person or adolescent in your life at this moment, but I'm so glad you are here because I absolutely believe that we all have a responsibility to the next generation. We have a responsibility to the next generation to learn, to understand what they're going through, what they are feeling, what they're experiencing, so that we can be a strong support for them in some way. So even if you, don't have anybody particularly in your life who represents the group that we're going to be talking about today, I have been praying that you would leave here with some kind of a special awareness in your heart that God would bring a young person into your life in a way that you can be a support to them, be a caring adult, to help the next generation coming behind us. So I get to introduce our speaker today. April Twenhafel has been a licensed marriage and family therapist for 18 years, working with adults, families, adolescents, and children. In addition to her practice in Newport Beach, April is the sole sanctuary director and clinical supervisor at Prepare to Change Child and Family Counseling. She also serves as a clinical supervisor at Seeds Therapy Center, which provides therapy to children in the Christian school system. For the last 10 years, April has been an adjunct professor at Azusa Pacific University, and she and her husband, Nick, are celebrating their 19th year of marriage in May and have the pleasure of parenting a 13-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old son. Would you please welcome April?
Well, I am super excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. We'll see if that water falls. It'll be okay if it does. I am just so grateful to be here. I don't know if you're aware of this, if this is your church home, but having a faith-based system that supports you in the mental health journey is not the run-of-the-mill in every church. And so I really appreciate the Saddleback community and what they have done in just really kind of leading that train. And I'm just very excited to be here and just continue to share with you some key issues that our kids are facing today. Depression and anxiety in teens is on the rise. So even if you don't have a child that's suffering, then just even being aware. And that way, if the signs and symptoms do come up, it's something you can identify hopefully early on as well. So let me introduce my children to you. So as she said, I have a daughter named Ella. She is 13. She's in 7th grade. That is my son, his name is Hudson. He's 9, but would definitely want me to tell you he will be 10 next week. And then this is our little Yachty boy who does not know that he is not a human. We have not had the heart to break it to him, so I count him as one of my children as well. Prior to becoming a therapist, I actually worked at a church in Las Vegas. At the time, I was 22. I was the youngest female pastor on staff in our community care department, and just kind of by default got all of the teenage girls that they kind of didn't know what to do with, that were having some stuff go on. And in that course of journeying with them, we actually had a couple therapists that came in from their private practice into our office a few days a week. And at the time, I had no idea how cutting edge that was, but they were amazing. And so often, part of my journey with these girls is they would have bigger issues that were beyond my training. My undergrad was in family life ministry with a focus on social work, and so they were dealing with divorce and grief and eating disorders and anxiety, and I had the pleasure of partnering with these therapists in the office of just kind of being that bridge for them to get services and get the help that they need. And in that course, just felt the Lord leading me to pursue my master's, and I just wanted to journey with people through that process. So for the last 18 years, I've really been known of working with children and adolescents, but do spend a lot of time with adults as well. I actually specialize in trauma, so with trauma work often includes depression and anxiety as well. So there's a lot of overlap today that you're going to hear in regards to those issues. So here are some of our big ideas that you're hopefully going to walk away today. We're going to identify the signs and symptoms of depression and anxiety. We're going to explore specifically some of the neuroscience by looking at how your emotions can impact your brain. We're going to discuss strategies for creating emotional connections with your children in the midst of their suffering, and discover how being attuned to your child's emotions can impact the dynamic of your parent-child relationship. So first off, we're going to talk about depression. As Christy was even sharing, often there is an overlap in depression and anxiety. They're not always independent from one another. They kind of are incestuous cousins in a lot of ways. So if you're dealing with one, you will often deal with another. So let's look at specifically what clinical depression is. So a lot of times we'll use that terminology of like, oh, I'm so depressed today. Depressed is a feeling that we all can deal with, whether you have clinical depression or not. But specifically in looking at clinical depression, it's characterized by persistent feelings of sadness, a loss of interest or pleasure in activities that you typically find enjoyable. These feelings, specifically for clinical depression, they need to be present for at least 2 weeks. And some of these symptoms can look like they're constantly feeling sad, increased irritability, feelings of guilt. So I look at that as kind of something happens and there's unnecessary responsibility or guilt that can be associated with that. Feelings of hopelessness, social withdrawal, decline in school performance. So if your kid's been doing okay, maybe if they're not at the top of their class, they're holding their own, but you start to see them dip and things become a lot more challenging for them academically. Sleeping too much or too little, changes in weight or appetite, as stated, loss of interest in previously enjoyed activities. This could include self-harm types of behavior, suicidal thoughts, and headaches and stomach pain. So what I find sometimes confusing about some of those symptoms is some of those, if I look at irritability, sleep, some of these things, I might even have the question of, isn't this kind of also what teenagers do? So there are days that my 13-year-old might have an emotional reaction. I totally have her permission to tell her stories, by the way. But she might have an emotional reaction, and internally I'm like, dear God, it's happening. It's like that teenager onset of the hormones and the dysregulation, and it just kind of feel like you're riding the wave along the way. So normal teenage behavior and development does include emotional and behavioral changes. So what can get confusing is as the teens tend to grow, it's natural for them to seek independence, right? You see them, I hear parents all the time, they're in their room more, they're not as interested in hanging out, but it's really would look at more of what the severe difference or changes is. So even my 13-year-old, I notice, she'll be hanging out with us, but she'll have an AirPod in. So she's not hidden in her room, but it is this kind of natural progression of her starting just to that normal teenage behavior of starting to retreat a little bit more. She's entering her own little world a little bit more. But when you see kind of the strong swing of the door into the opposite direction of really they're very disconnected, disengaged, not only from you guys, perhaps from friends as well. Another aspect would be sleep. Teenagers like to sleep, so that's not uncommon. But one of the notes would be, are they just wanting to sleep more in on the weekends, or are you noticing chronic fatigue? Are they falling asleep in the middle of the day? Are they falling asleep in class? I have clients that deal with depression, and they'll tell me, I totally fell asleep in class today. And part of that is they're not sleeping well at night as well because of the depression or the anxiety symptoms, and then they're falling asleep in class additionally. So you really want to look, does this feel kind of that normal teenage swing? And I would say that even if they want to sleep more, I do believe one of the things that can really help from depression snowballing is still having some sort of routine of sleep, in that sense of whatever your family rule might be, if it's not sleeping past 10, some sort of regular wake-up time to keep the rhythm kind of in check a little bit so it doesn't snowball and turn into this vicious cycle. But it is normal for them to want to sleep more. Sadness and hopelessness can be disguised as anger. I actually had one of my supervisors tell me once that depression can be anger turned inwards. So are you seeing more explosive type of anger and frustration and more dysregulation? I'm a sarcastic person. Sarcasm might even be my love language. But is it nasty sarcasm? Is it cutting? Does it just feel unwarranted and these jabs? It's not playful and fun. It has a different type of heaviness and stickiness to it. Are they easily annoyed in such a big way it feels disproportionate to whatever might have provoked them, right? So you're looking for kind of those grand responses to something that it just doesn't feel like they should match. The other thing is being that whatever is changing is typically gradual in normal development, where things tend to be more sudden when it comes to depression and anxiety. You're going to see that switch that's happening in them. Insecurities are a normal part of a teenage life, right? I don't know a teenager that's not battling with their identity, feeling embarrassed at school, embarrassed of you. It's just kind of this normal part of growing up. But are the insecurities disproportionate, again, in that sense of they're just constantly plagued with negative self-talk? That sense of worthlessness that can come out, and the things that they say, well, there's no point of even trying, I'm not ever good at anything, right? So is there a bigger shift of negativity in how they describe themselves? So kind of the keynote is in this, that the key to differentiating that normal teenage behavior is that you also will see with clinical depression those symptoms that are on the previous slide as well, right? So it's not just they're occasionally grouchy, sassy, normal stuff. You're going to see it accompany some of this more severe symptoms as well. So times that you don't want to hesitate, right? So when is a time that I need to reach out? So first and foremost, in regards to self-harm behaviors, that's not something you want to sit on. Kids self-harm for different reasons. Sometimes they're so numb they want to feel something. Sometimes they self-harm because it's a release. It can serve different things for them, but it can become very addictive in nature because it's finally feeling something or some sort of release, and none of their other coping strategies seem to be working, right? So if you notice that, you want to reach out for help immediately. In the case of suicidal thoughts, so I wanted to introduce even this idea of like passive suicidal ideation. I think we tend to hear, suicidal thoughts as like that I have a plan, I want to kill myself, I don't want to be here anymore. But I would say very common, I hear more passive suicidal ideation when it comes to depression. And it's essentially kind of like the precursor to an actual plan and moving into suicidal thoughts, right? So these are some of the phrases I hear. I wish I was never born. I wish I could disappear. My family would be better off without me. I hope I don't wake up in the morning. I wish someone would crash into my car. Right, so it's where these thoughts kind of come in, and for me as a clinician, when one of my clients says this, like I start impacting this. I recognize like, ooh, we're at like a kind of a slippery slope, right? So I want to identify what's going on for them and figure out what their need is in that moment so that we can hopefully move to more of a preventative place before we're into the actual, I have a plan, I'm really considering doing this, right? For you as the parents or loved ones, really that role is creating a safe place for open communication, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about like our own emotional regulation in that because it's scary. These are scary topics. It's absolutely terrifying. If you guys are like me, my kids, these are my babies. And I like want to go into like that full force protective mode. But if my fear takes over in that moment, I end up shutting them down and I become unsafe for them to talk to about things. Even as a clinician, I have to regulate my own anxiety when kids are talking about these type of things, even though I'm like, we have a code red, that's my internal response. But still, externally, how can I show up for them, connect with them? So same thing for you guys. How can you show up and connect, being mindful of what your own emotional regulation needs to be in that moment? And then if there is a need for a safety plan. So if they're in active suicidal thoughts, like there always is the option of taking them to a hospital. Any general ER can help them. I am personally partial to CHOC for their pediatric care, just because they know, live, breathe children and adolescents, and I just feel like the type of care they get is a little different than just in the general hospital. So if you do get to that place, I definitely recommend leaning more of that direction, because we also don't want that experience to also be traumatic, and it kind of can be already. So if they don't get met with a proper love and response and care from the medical team, it can make it harder then for them to reach out if those types of thoughts continue down the road. All right, so next we will talk about teen depression. Am I not on? I am on. Or teen, I'm not moving. I don't know if that was you or me, but this is where we're going now. We're headed to anxiety. My anxiety was increasing as the slide was not moving. It was just a demonstration for you guys so you could see what it looked like. It's all planned. So we all experience anxiety, right? And some anxiety is even like healthy anxiety. If I'm standing on the side of a cliff and there is not a rail, friends, I'm hoping I feel anxious and scared in that moment, right? Sometimes anxiety can be preventative, but clinical anxiety hits a little different. So according to the American Psychological Association, they defined anxiety as an emotion characterized by feelings or worried thoughts and physical changes like increased blood pressure. So typical anxiety-based symptoms and signs can include like racing thoughts. So racing thoughts, I always describe it, it's like a hamster on a wheel, and they just keep going, right? And then we can move into overthinking, because it can be really hard to get that hamster off the wheel when you're dealing with anxious thoughts. Like it feels like it has nowhere else to go, and so you just ruminate in it. Or even negative thought loops, like it's hard to convince yourself of any other options, because typically, we're very intelligent as people, right? So we can justify our anxieties and why they're totally reasonable and rational, right? And it can keep us stuck in this loop. Sadness, difficulty concentrating, so difficulty focusing. I will say both of my kids have ADHD, and one of the things that I see when they have difficulty concentrating, I see an increase also in anxiety. So sometimes people don't know that there can be an overlap with anxiety and ADHD. It's because it's so hard to concentrate, it can make them feel behind, and then that just increases that sense of anxious thoughts and like negative self-talk in those moments as well. Being restless or even jumpy, so you're a little bit more hypervigilant, aware of your surroundings, difficulty sleeping. I see a lot with kids and teens is some of the somatic symptoms, some of the physical symptoms that come on, such as nausea, headaches, stomach pain, loss of appetite. Numbness and tingling in their hands, isolation or even withdrawal, perfectionism. Our perfectionistic, high standard kids tend to deal with anxiety, and then that part and pressure that you put on yourself to do better, do it right, whatever right is, can also be a trait of anxiety. And then easily fatigued. If you've ever experienced anxiety, it's exhausting. Like your whole body is like on. And then at the end of it, you're just like wiped. You're done, you're ready to pull back. So that they're more easily fatigued, and indecisiveness. So this also connects to that overthinking, negative thought loops. It can be really hard to execute decisions that need to be made. So if you look in the DSM, which is our diagnostic criteria, there are pages upon pages upon pages of anxiety disorders, okay? We would be here till next week if we were really gonna go over all of them. But I did wanna highlight some of the key ones I see come up the most, whether it's in my private practice or in supervising in the schools. I wanna just kind of highlight these for you, not so that you need to diagnose your own kids, but just kind of more of that signs of like what to look for and when to reach out for help, okay? Generalized anxiety disorder, our number one. That's what we see the most. Sometimes you might hear people call it GAD, because it stands for the GAD of generalized anxiety disorder. It's where the source of worry can change. It can change from day to day. It can change over a variety of different aspects of life. And specifically with generalized anxiety, this types of persistent worry and anxiety are, if you look at a 6-month period, you're going to be anxious for more days than not, right? So it's not like, oh, I've been like high stress project at school, group projects are like terrible for mental health, I think. Great for grit, terrible for mental health. But it can be really like, is it temporary, or is this something that tends to last a lot longer? And they'll specifically have difficulty controlling or managing their anxiety. Like it's gonna be very overwhelming for them. Even with social anxiety. So social anxiety is where there is an extreme fear of being humiliated and embarrassed, judged or criticized in social situations. And what they'll do is they'll tend to avoid then the opportunity to be triggered. So they're going to socially isolate a lot more, dances, things like that. It just feels like a terrible plan to them. They're like, that's not fun, but it's because it's very anxiety provoking for them. OCD. So I feel like we, just as people, we throw around this term a lot, right? Like I'm so OCD about like my pantry being organized, or if you guys have watched Friends at all, Monica Geller, her cleaning, right? We would say like she has like OCD type of cleaning. But OCD specifically, if you're looking at it from a clinical perspective, it's where the anxiety comes up, where it interferes with daily tasks due to the thoughts that feel impossible to control. Behaviors are an attempt to alleviate or soothe the anxiety they're experiencing that comes with the thoughts. So here's an example of this. I have a client that has OCD. The way hers manifests is every night she has a ritual that she has to pray a certain prayer. And she has to look at a certain spot when she says that prayer. And the belief is, the thought is, if I don't say this prayer, I'm going to die tonight and I'm going to go to hell, right? So, just really intense emotion. So for her, she knows logically, this is not logical. This is not what Scripture says. This isn't biblical. She can understand that. But that feeling and that thought is so big that it's easier just to do the routine and have like a sense of peace. Sometimes she might have to do it 3 times. But it creates some sort of self-soothing type of feeling for her, right? So it's a behavior that is necessary in order to try to self-soothe whatever the feeling is, okay? Sometimes I think we think about it like, oh, I have to touch the, wash my hands so many times or touch the light switch. And it can be that, but there's still some sort of belief that drives that behavior. And then panic disorder. So panic disorder is persistent and unexpected panic attacks. So we're going to actually talk about panic attacks and an anxiety attack. I'm not sure if you know that there's a difference, but there is. Honestly, if your kid's having one, I don't know if it's really helpful to tell them. You know, I'm not usually correcting people. Actually, that wasn't a panic attack. You were having, you know. But I do think it's helpful to know what they are. Because when a client comes in and says, well, I had a panic attack this week, and I'm like, well, tell me about it. Tell me what was going on this week when it happened. And sometimes I realize it is a panic attack, and sometimes I realize it was actually an anxiety attack. So a panic attack is specifically when your body goes into survival mode. It's an overactive response resulting in kind of like that fight or flight response without a potential threat. So there's nothing actually triggering the anxiety in that moment. It just kind of comes out of nowhere, seen as very unexpected. Physical symptoms typically are very intense. So they may include rapid or irregular heartbeat, nausea, hot flashes and chills, lightheadedness, shakiness, numbness, chest pain, stomach pain, and difficult breathing. So it can actually feel like you're dying. Happens all the time. People end up in the ER thinking something is wrong because of some of these symptoms, and then they do the tests and they're, have you been stressed? And they're like, yes. So it's like, yeah, you had a panic attack. And they're very disruptive in nature, and therefore it produces a more intense response because you don't see it coming, right? Then that's really scary. Panic attacks can subside just as fast as they can actually come on as well. Now, anxiety attack, they are similar in the sense that they have some physical symptoms as well, but they are typically caused by a specific stressor. So anxiety can gradually build where a panic attack comes on suddenly, right? So you can kind of see, I'll give you an example in a moment, but there is like this build that's actually happening, and it is characterized by intrusive and racing thoughts. And you can typically find that identifiable trigger. So they can last hours or days, and they can actually turn into a panic attack as well. So I had a client this week, comes in, 19 years old. Initially started seeing her for anxiety, and she was like, I had a really rough day on Monday. And when she initially came to therapy, she came actually over a panic attack that she had. She was at college, away at college, had a panic attack, racing heart, difficulty breathing, actually passed out. And so that's initially what brought her into therapy. And then this week she comes in and she said, I had a really rough day on Monday. She was like, I felt like I had like a temper tantrum. And I was like, okay, like, tell me more about that, you know? And she begins to describe what had happened. She was so just flooded with emotions, all of these racing thoughts. Life is really stressful right now. She's feeling behind in her college class, doesn't know if she's going to get everything done in time. Lots of family dynamics that are bringing stress for her, in a relationship that she's trying to decide if she should be in or not, right? So a lot of different stressors happening. And she was like, I couldn't even, like, her boyfriend, like, tried to hold her, and she was like, that was not what I needed. She was just, like, flipping out at the time. And so I said, it sounds like you had an anxiety attack. And she looks at me, and she was like, okay, well, I don't want it to happen again. With her, I need you to fix it, April eyes, right? Like, that was the look that she was giving me in that moment, because it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. And so for her, you know, in that moment, just like putting words to that for her, if this is what it was. And then she did end up asking me, she said, well, what's the difference between that and a panic attack? So we ended up talking about those differences. But I think for her to then recognize for this particular client of, there is a stress build that's happening for her and some things that she needs to identify and like changing that are actually within her control, and being able to process this a little bit more. So in a nutshell, that's the difference between a panic attack versus an anxiety attack. So I want to look at what is actually, friends, here we go, happening in the brain. If I ever get my doctorate in anything, it will be in neuropsychology because I could totally geek out on this stuff. Like, it is so exciting to me. You guys don't look nearly as excited when I say that. That's okay. Hopefully you'll be excited by the end. But when I look at the brain and how we're wired, I just see God's hands like all over it. And I think that's what like excites me so much about it, because I can just see how he's made us. I can see when he talks about scripture and that we should meditate on things day and night and how neural pathways are actually created. I'm like, look at you, God, knowing like thousands of years ago things were just figuring out in research, you know? He's like, thanks, April, I appreciate that. So let's talk about like the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. We probably have heard these terms before. I think typically we love to say men are left brain and women are right brain, right? Left brain is where you think logically. It's the part of your brain that organizes thought. It's very literal, very factual, very analytical, right? Where that right part of your brain tends to be more intuitive. It reads the nonverbal cues of like when you walk into a room and you kind of feel stuff, or you're looking at someone's face and you know something's up. It is the more emotional side of the brain. It tends to think about things from a big picture standpoint, and it makes meanings of experiences. But the truth is, we're not actually dominant. The only time you're dominant on one side is in the toddler years, where your right hemisphere is primarily dominant. And that's because you don't have the left brain development yet for the cognitive functioning to be able to put some words to the things that you're experiencing. So that's why we call them terrible twos, horrible threes, right? There's just a lot of emotion because they are right brain dominant at that time. So in addition to that, I'm so glad you guys have me. Here we go. Okay, so one of my favorite books that I use in parenting a lot, if you're familiar at all, is Dan Siegel and Tina Bryson. They have this book called The Whole Brain Child. Specifically, it's really written for parenting younger children, but we're going to pull some principles from it and talk about it today because it is completely applicable throughout parenting, even into adulthood. I feel like as a mom, it has changed my understanding of what my kids need when they're having emotional distress. And I'm wanting to share a little bit of that with you today. So Dan has something, he often uses his hand model of the brain. So the amygdala that you can see that's in that kind of like central part, that is really kind of like our survival part of our brain. It's where our blinking and our breathing happens, but it's also where our tense motions like anger, anxiety, fear, those happen in that part of the brain. And then where your prefrontal cortex happens is more that front part of your brain is really where that logic and reasoning come from. So Dan has a word that he said, like when this is firing, like you flip your lid. So your kids can't actually acknowledge that logical part because it's too triggered at that point, right? And so once we regulate the amygdala and soothe that part, this part kind of comes back online and we can access it a little more. So my son, when he doesn't want to do something that I've asked him to do, I'll be like, Hudson, can you empty the dishwasher? He'll go, out of order. And then he like freezes. So in my head, when I think about this, like flipping your lid and that kind of goes offline, I feel like your prefrontal cortex is saying, out of order. Like it just like can't be budged in that mode, right? So we have to be able to calm that brain down in order to be able to get through some of the reasonable parts. So another metaphor for this is called the window of tolerance, if you've had that. So the idea when we're operating within our window is that we are really calm, like we're more in a calm state of mind. We're able to access reason and emotion. So you have that ability to access the logic. You're more relaxed, your emotions are in control. But when we exit that window, we can enter a state of hyperarousal. So the hyperarousal would be where that amygdala is firing in regards to like fear, panic, you see that anxiety kick up. It's more of, I would say, kind of like the higher streams of like emotion, like energy type of emotion. And it's when you're at that place, you can't calm down. It's very, very difficult to calm down on your own. Where the hypoarousal is more of the shutting down. So that's where you're going to see more of the depression happen. So phrases that they might say is like, I'm just so tired. Like teens are tired, but are they tired all the time? Sometimes that phrase can be used as kind of like a identifier of like, I'm really just not interested in connecting. I'm just so tired, right? So you're entered that more of that hypoarousal state where you're on the bottom side of that window. So being able to Connect with your child, being able to identify with them what they're feeling will help them enter back in that, but it really starts with a lot of validation and naming things that they're experiencing. Which kind of leads us to the next part. So we know all of these things now, right? You have like a snapshot. What is depression? What is anxiety? What's happening in the brain? Now, April, what do I do about that? What do I do with all this information? So I really just kind of want to start from like parenting out of a place of love. You are here on a Sunday afternoon when it is beautiful outside because you love your kids. You are invested. You want to know more, right? So you're already off to a great start. But really, I want to highlight when we're parenting out of love, we really want to be very aware of where our fears are, right? So I kind of identified a little bit about that earlier. So our fears can influence our parenting styles and our responses. So like I said, this is scary. These are scary topics, scary things. And so when that fear kind of hijacks us, which means we exit our own window of tolerance, right? It's really hard to respond in the way that our kids need. Your own stress levels impact your response to your child. So when I was editing my slides this week, I'm reading out loud to make sure it all sounded right, and I said, your stress level impacts your response to your child. And my daughter goes, I know that's the truth. I'm like, thanks, babe. But it does. And I would even say like chronic pain and your own things that you're experiencing, that lowers your capacity as well. It makes it difficult to respond versus react. So a response is really where we kind of take, it's like such a split second, but it's still like this like momentary response of, I'm thinking about what I'm going to say versus that knee-jerk reaction, right? So remember my daughter had told me she had this terrible day at school. She's in 7th grade. Someone was just being so nasty. It was really a hard day. And so she's telling me about it. And then I'm like sitting there and listening. I'm very much having an internal response, like a mama bear kind of response. And I'm quiet. And she's like, right? You like don't even know what to say, right? And I said, that's not my problem right now. I'm like, I have so many words, and I'm trying to find Jesus. I'm just trying to find Jesus so I can tell you like how to respond in this moment. But I was recognizing like I flooded with my own thoughts of what I would love to say in this moment, but it was not helpful. So I had to throw on that filter and recognize what I was actually feeling, how to regulate it, and meet her in that moment. Because we do model self-regulation. And that's where they learn how to do this. So when you are being triggered, I would just ask that you even take a moment for yourself. Sometimes you can't do this in the moment. Sometimes we have to work backwards. It's after the fact of like, ooh, I did not handle that right? We all have those moments. I have that moment as well. But if like, okay, what was actually going on for me in that moment? What was I scared of? What was that response actually about, right? Because then I can learn from it. Then the next time it happens, it can increase my ability to show up the way that really my child deserves for me to show up. And so your approach can unintentionally trigger the survival part of that brain. So I imagine we could all say something comes out of your mouth and it's out, and you just wish you could like reel it back in, right? And like gain control of it again. So being mindful of how we are responding and how that can actually have a different response, or manage a different response from them. So even if you've never gone to church before and you've gone to a wedding, we're all familiar with 1 Corinthians 13, right? But I really do love it. It's such a snapshot of really what we are doing, what we are striving to be as parents. So love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with truth. And this is my favorite part. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres, right? So when we're talking about parenting our kids from love, I'm really talking about connection with them, that love and operating from that place of love, that as Christy said, you don't always know the outcome, but there is something about showing up and being present and just simply loving people in that moment that can be such a gift to them. So when we're attending to our child's emotional world, it really is a building block for a strong relationship. So when our kids are having emotions, when we're having emotions, it's actually indicating a request for what we're needing, right? So the emotions invite us to pay close attention with compassion and curiosity. It's connecting your child's emotions. It can actually inform them of their needs. And attention to those feelings builds trust. So not just assuming. I actually was reading a friend of mine, today's her 50th birthday, and she was reflecting on things that she's learned in 50 years. But one of the things that she had said was, more words equal less impact. And she was like, less words equal more impact. You know, she was specifically talking about parenting her 3 kids, just showing up for people in ministry. And it's that attention to feelings that really builds trust, asking questions out of curiosity. And the truth is, our kids, even our teenagers, as much as they don't like to admit it, they need our help to make sense of strong emotions. So this is not a exhaustive list. This is very limited. But I just wanted to highlight what some of the emotions can actually mean as an indicator of what the need is under the surface. So if they're feeling lonely, they're needing connection. Angry, just even that desire to feel understood. My daughter had a rough day, I think last week at school. And we were sitting on the couches and she's just telling me about it. And honestly, I wasn't even saying much reflection, or I was literally just in listening mode. And at the end, she said, "Thank you so much for just listening. I feel like you're the first person today that's just listened, and I really feel understood." Right? And I didn't even say anything, you know? It was really like a lot of nonverbals, you know? I was just sitting there with her. So there's something about and she was fit to be tied. She was angry and venting about her day, but then the tears start coming. We start, just as she's processing it, she's feeling seen and understood. When you're feeling anxious, sometimes you just need to feel safe. When you're feeling sad, you often need comfort. And when you're feeling overwhelmed, sometimes you need a reset, right? And you need to rest, and you need to be able to just kind of retreat a little bit. Sometimes if there's even when there's work to be done with kids and school and some of those things, sometimes it's just not worth it. And you just need to pull back and allow them to rest and reset so they can show up and do the things that they need to do as well. So when we're talking about connection, there's such power in connection. There's power in that connection of relationship. I love that we are hardwired for connection. So in the type of therapy I do, I'm very much I do therapy from an attachment perspective. So I'm really looking at your attachment styles and how you do relationships. And our brains are actually hardwired in that way as well. So years ago, there was this clinical study. To me, it just sounds breaks my mama's heart thinking about this, but they studied infants' brains in an orphanage. And these new babies, they just let cry it out. They didn't console them. They didn't offer comfort in holding. And when they scanned the brains, what they saw is going back to that amygdala, right? So the amygdala actually began shrinking. So the kids are barely existing in this world, and they're already knowing it's not okay to expect anything, and that part of the brain actually begins shutting down, right, and kind of dying off, yeah. And so with that, when they reintroduce these same kids, these same babies back into holdings and being attuned to and respond, and they scan the brains again, that part of the brain actually began to flourish and expand, right? So which I love, God's healing is always available, right? We're not beyond, He's always there. And our brains are meant for that. It shows a thriving brain and what can happen in those moments. So Ephesians 4:2 says, "Be completely humble and gentle, be patient, bearing with one another in love." Galatians 6:2 says, "Carrying each other's burden, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ." There's so many examples of connection and community in Scripture. I mean, these are just 2. But I love it because it doesn't say fixing one another in love, right? It doesn't say fixing each other's burdens. There's this idea of showing up in presence and in love and what the gift that can be to people that are hurting. And even in Romans 12, 4 through 5, talking about the body of Christ, right? Like you are here in a community. There's actual resources and connection for you. I think as parents, we want to do, if we could do it all, we would do it all. I think we just would do it, but we don't have to, right? And that's the beauty of the body of Christ and reaching out to your pastors, to the resources and the different ministries that exist, is that you don't have to do this alone. It's okay that you don't know how to do all the things, because the body of Christ is sufficient in those ways to show up and fill in those gaps when you don't have the strength to lean into other people that can help carry you and get you through. So showing up for your kids is so vital, recognizing what's important to them. Sometimes that is in like the small things of, I have a nephew, like when I talk to him, he talks to me about like cyborgs and all kinds of stuff that is not my language. It is not my world at all, but I adore him. So I listen and I ask questions and I'm confused, but that's important to him. And in doing so, that builds that bridge of connection and trust, right? So prioritize what's meaning to them. And then being present. So I had a kid recently say, like her mom had rented like this grand suite at the California Grand at Disneyland, and it was beautiful and amazing. And she was so excited, and she was like, and we get there, and my mom's just on her phone. And she was so sad. Like she has this incredible experience, but at the end of the day, she just wanted her mom. I wanted to connect in that way. I had a 17-year-old that I was actually seeing in a grief group. And I would say most likely she presented as not really needing people, like very independent, self-sufficient, big personality. She was actually so much fun to have in the group. And I remember one day she had like a job, and she said, she was like, it really sucks. I come home from work at like 9:30 at night, and she's like, my whole family's in bed. She's like, the house just feels so lonely. But I remember thinking, there's no way your parent has any idea that you want to connect with them, because I guarantee that's not how she presents. But still there's this core desire, as independent as she may show, there is like this strong desire to be known and connect with her family. So let's talk about connecting with them and then redirecting. So going back to that image of the brain, the logic won't respond until we engage the emotional needs, right? So research actually says our brains are wired to respond to love and empathy even in distress, which totally takes me back to that Ephesians 4:2 that says, be completely humble and gentle, be patient, bearing with one another in love. And that the research is saying our brains are actually wired to respond to love and empathy, even when we're in distress. Like, I think that is so cool. When you're in that moment and you're like feeling the need of like, okay, how do I show up? Start with connecting your right brain with their right brain. Stick with like the emotional part of it. Like, what are they feeling? What are they experiencing? And stick with that. And as that part of their emotional experience feels seen, they begin to be calm, and then you can go into teaching moments and some of the other stuff that the left side of the brain actually needs, but being able to show up and connect with them. Connecting means acknowledging emotion, could include physical touch, empathetic facial expressions, nurturing tone, and a non-judgmental voice. So just know, like, it can take some time for us to regulate. It doesn't, like, well, I was empathetic. I don't know why she's still upset. So sometimes it takes a little bit of time. And especially if the trust has been kind of damaged along the way, then you have to steward those moments over and over again with repetition. And I feel like most of the time when kids want to connect, it is not convenient to the parent's schedule, right? My son loves to ask me something profound as we're driving up in the drop-off line, and I have 30 seconds to get him out. I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this like deep theological question in the next 15 seconds, right? So no, it's not convenient in finding out ways, even if you can't sometimes talk in those moments. Sometimes you have to drop what you're doing in that moment and make it happen. But sometimes it's circling back around. Just make sure you circle back around. I sometimes will say that. My kid will say something, and it's like 10 o'clock at night. I'm like, this is not a 10 o'clock at night conversation. Let's talk tomorrow afternoon. And then I sometimes forget we're supposed to talk in the afternoon, right? So you got to make sure you actually follow through. All right, so just even like from a spiritual standpoint, because this can be overwhelming, depending on like what kind of the state of your relationship is with your kid, it can be hard to know why. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be attuning to and seeing. And one of my favorite things to pray is asking God for the strategy. So Holy Spirit, increase my emotional attunement to my child. Give me the strategy and the discernment for what they need in this moment. Right? Just inviting him into it, because sometimes we're so flooded by the big picture, and really we just kind of need this step right now in the here and now. Identifying their emotions that they're feeling. So Dan Siegel says, like, name it and tame it. So when we name what they're experiencing, it helps soothe the brain. So research shows that naming our emotions is one of the quickest ways to soothing, regulating, and the quickest path to healing. So identifying those feelings that they're experiencing. Don't minimize or dismiss. So don't worry, you're fine. Or so just like, well, you just need to pray more. Like that can cause them like a wedge as well between them and God. Retelling the stories, you're hearing them describe things, like just reflecting back. What is it that they're saying? What are you hearing them say? And ask for clarity. And when we do this and label what we feel, literally our brains calm down, because it calms the emotional circuitry in our brains and allows our child to calm down and feel more in control. So here are some just resources for you guys and your kids. There is, a suicide hotline when you need it. Having your kids being aware of that too, if you're creating safety plans for them. I love that there's a warm line. If you're not familiar with that, basically means you're not in crisis, but you're just not feeling okay, and you just kind of need to connect with somebody. I mentioned Chalk on there as well. The How We Feel app. I use this a lot with kids and adults. I actually have a lot of adults that love this app. It's a free app, and it just increases like your emotional vocabulary of what you're feeling. Like sometimes we're like, well, I'm happy, sad, angry, frustrated. Like it's so limited, and there's a plethora. And there's something about being able to identify what we're feeling in that moment that can help, and you can kind of like journal about it, like very briefly, like I was with friends, or I was at school, or I was at work, and identify maybe even like a pattern of feelings that you experience in certain places. I love Headspace for anxiety specifically. They have a free version. It's like $70 for the year, but any teen, they have a third party that will cover the subscription for them. So if you just Google Headspace free for teens, it's literally, I thought it was kind of shady at first, so that's what I got to tell you. It's like a Google form that's like you fill out, and I'm like, who is this? Are you really who you say you are? But it was legit. And then I've had many clients that have got the Headspace app for that. There's so many out there, but I like that this one has a free option for your students. And then, if you're not aware of a 504 education plan, a lot of times we'll hear about IEPs, individualized education plans, but 504s are really great options if your children are struggling with emotional disturbances at school. It can help regulate timeline for projects, expectations. My daughter has a 504. We have a great school counselor that is very grounding for her. But there's things like if she's having a bad day, like one of her things is she has a journal at the front desk, and they see her walk up and they're like, hey, Ella, and they hand her journal. And it's just like a containment thing for her, like to be able to sit and like process those emotions. Sometimes it might be additional time on homework, or she can still do the advanced classes, but there's accommodations that allow her to be in those classes, but also be able to take care of her mental health. So 504s can be customized a variety of different ways, but I wanted to share that with you because a lot of people don't know that those exist, and they're very common in the middle school and high school settings. So that is basically it. I felt like I was cramming a lot in at the time. So thank you so much for having me. I know we're going to segue into some reflection questions. Todd, I don't know if you want to lead us in that? Perfect.
All right. Thank you very much. That was awesome. Very, very good. Well, let's turn into your tables. We have some questions there for you to discuss as a table. Also, just want to remind you, you have those little note cards, Any questions you have, write those down. We're going to come by and pick those up, and we'll use those during our question and answer time. So the cards are what we use, not raised hands. So if you have a question, write it down on those cards, and we'll come get them. All right, turn into your tables and talk about these questions, and we'll come back in a bit.
The tastes, the smells, the textures, the feeling of my feet on the ground. Every feeling. Happiness, sadness, confusion, anger, ecstasy. Every feeling. Thank you. I love you. Thoughts. Whatever shape those thoughts are taking, memories, all the stories, imagination, even fear. Thank you. I love you. Pain, wonder. Thank you, life. Thank you, death. Thank you, everything and everyone, all beings, all non-being, all the ineffable mystery that is and isn't, and the absurdity of these words. I love you. I love you, I am. I love you coming up from the womb of mother, like fruit on an ancient and infinite tree with roots that go down, down.
Clap their hands for you. Oceans they dance for you. Heaven taunts the hearts of men. We can feel it from within. The beauty of it all, the mystery, the swelling of a voice, a rising sea. Holy, oh, behold the holy. Trees clap their hands for you. Oceans they dance for you. You are holy, infinite and holy. A billion suns rise for you. Clouds paint the skies for you. Mountains stand tall for you. Valleys bow down to you. Everything rising to sing all our songs to you. Holy, the impossible and holy. Kings become fools for you, kingdoms to ruins for you. Vapor finds ground in you, music finds sound in you. Everything rising, everything rising, everything rising, everything rising,
is all that I want, drawing me closer. I feel the pull of the tide, drawing me closer. Your love is all that I want, your love is all that I want. I feel the pull of the tide, drawing me closer. Your love is all that I want, drawing me closer. I feel the pull of the tide, drawing me closer. Your love is all that I want, your love is all that I.
All righty, let me pull us back in here. And it's time for our question and answer time. And so we had some great questions come in from all of you, and we'll kind of go through those. You want to start?
Want me to start? Sure.
Yeah.
Well, so let's dive into this one. We'll kind of go back and forth here. But someone was asking about what if the passive ideation or temper tantrum / rage is toward their sibling, like I wish he was dead or I wish he was never born. So they're responding, taking theirs, and toward a sibling.
Yeah, sometimes when we are experiencing emotions, we can lash out at others, right? So I would be curious to even know, what is it about that sibling relationship specifically that's going on that there might be some extra hostility in that case. But I still feel like there's something going on underneath the surface that it's creating and bubbling up in a way that would need attention. So even at that place, and even for the child that's on the receiving end, like that's really hard to hear, right? That my sibling feels this way about me. And so I would definitely just recommend at that point reaching out for some counseling and try to get some services to kind of flush out what might be going on. But for sure could be a depressive aspect for actually both of the kids. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, on that same note, I think there was a little bit of confusion about the difference between passive ideation and active, right? Because they, kind of asked the question about, I hope someone hits my car, and suicidal, passive. So what's the difference again, passive and active? I think there's a little bit of confusion.
Yeah. A passive ideation to me feels, it's a little bit more casual. It's not this actual plan, like I'm going to drive my car into the wall. Right, or I have a plan of I'm going to go home and I'm going to take some pills when I go to bed at night, where there's actual plan that's going on. They've thought about how they might do it, if they have access to those means. So there's a little bit more concrete thought into it versus just that, I would say, like despair of like, I don't want to wake up in the morning. They don't actually want to die. I have clients tell me all the time, they're like I just wish I could like go to sleep and not wake up tomorrow. And then I love when they're like, I'm not going to kill myself. Like they rush in with that, but it's that sense of like, they're just telling me like, I am so without hope right now. So the real difference is it I have a desire for the pain to end, for it just to kind of disappear versus a concrete, I've really thought about this, and maybe even I have a plan to actually do it.
Can I just ask you, I think one of the scariest things, you said it, but I would confirm, one of the scariest things is to think your child might take their life.
Yes.
And so I know that it took a long time for us to be able to say, go beyond the, yes, I'm feeling, I wish I wasn't here, hearing that, but then asking, have you thought of us? Yeah. We're terrified to even ask those kinds of questions. Not even just with teenagers, but with people we love.
Absolutely.
Friends, family members. And that's just a very hard question to ask. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's the fear of like, if I say it, am I planting the idea? Like am I giving a suggestion? But a lot of times there's so much relief. I have seen it in different ways. There can be relief in being seen, like, yes, like, thank you so much for asking. I've had people that it's almost like jolted them in the sense of like, ooh, like, you're seeing something in me that I don't even see. Like, I'm not as okay as what I thought that I was, But yeah, even if sometimes just our own fears of like, if I ask that I'm going to somehow plant this idea in them. And I typically find I've never had that happen. Research says that actually doesn't happen. If someone's thinking about it, they're actually considering it at that point.
That's good. Another question was asked, someone asked, as a coach for high school girls, if someone who has mental health issues, what are some of the things to pay attention to? How do you approach them? And let's see, how do I approach them if I'm starting to see issues like eating disorders, mental health issues, that kind of thing? So if you're seeing it as like a youth leader, let's say, how do you approach that?
Yeah, I think checking in. It's so nice, especially in large groups of people, to feel noticed and seen. And so just making an observation of a check-in of like, hey, I just wanted to see how you're doing. I actually did a young adults talk on Monday. And I texted the youth pastor. It was a smaller group, about 25 people. And there was a girl in the front row that looked like she was having a really hard time. And so I texted the youth pastor after, and I said, I think she just needs checked in on, And when we debriefed about it later, he just went up to her and just like, hey, like, wanted to see like how you were feeling after tonight, or if you have like an observation of like, hey, I've just noticed like you're not your normal like bubbly self. It just feels like you've shifted a little bit. Like, I wanted to check in on you, see how you're doing, or if the eating disorder of like, hey, same thing, I want to check in. I just kind of noticed, like, I don't notice you eating very much. It looks like you've lost a little bit of weight. I just wanted to see if you're doing okay. And then if there is concern, it's always that, I think there's an aspect of discernment with it as well, of like reaching out to the parents, seeing what additional support that you could be able to give them. That might not be the best case scenario in every home, but reaching out and getting them the support that they need, connecting them to local resources, even here at the church, can be very beneficial.
This goes along. Oh, sorry.
And I would just say too, in those cases, bring it up to the youth leaders in our youth ministry, because we're all connected. We connect with them with pastoral care, and so if it's something serious, you're not alone. We're able to help with that as well. So you don't have to do all that by yourself.
Yeah, I was going to piggyback. This is a question from a teacher, similar, only slightly different, about noticing a student who has social anxiety. Like trying to know when is the right thing. Do I encourage them to be more group activities, or allow him or her to withdraw from group activities? But I would also put that into like either parents, again, you take that whole context.
Yes.
Someone has social anxiety. What's the best way we can help?
Yes. I think going back to, again, just kind of observing that, and just, a lot of times kids will talk to their teachers before they'll even talk to a parent about things. And so I typically find just even pouring into them the identity that you see them have, and like affirming them, asking if there are things that, what would make it easier for you to attend these things? Like, I'd love for you to go with us to this event. Like, oh, like, no, like, that's not my jam. Of like, what would make it easier? Sometimes having an anchor, like someone that's going to be there, or even sometimes an exit strategy. Like, if you're too flooded, like having like a plan of like, well, what, if it's not going well for you, so then they don't feel trapped, because trap's going to increase the anxiety as well. So it might be like, okay, if you're not having like a good time, like what would then be the steps in leaving? Like, as funny as that may sound, but it resources them to feel like they can be equipped to maybe dip their toe in. But yeah, I think encouraging them to do it versus like, you need to do this, and more intensely focusing is not going to be helpful, but more of a warm invite, seeing if you can even resource them in some ways.
I feel like saying to somebody, it'll be fun, when they have social anxiety, is like them saying, you do not understand me at all. So maybe avoid that line.
Yes.
I was going to then talk about, somebody else asked about the emotional, that we've talked about the emotional and spoken approach with teens. What do you have anything to say about, diet, exercise aspect of approaching anxiety and depression? What role do you see that plays?
I think I actually love the research that's coming up. I think in the next 10 years, we're going to see a lot more when it comes to diet and what we're putting into our bodies, and how that impacts our emotions. There's a variety of people out there kind of leading this research. There's a gentleman I follow that does all kind of webinars and things. He's not a believer, I don't believe. It's Dr. James Greenbelt, but he does great things on supplements and nutrition and what we're eating, how that impacts ADHD, depression, anxiety. The thing with exercise is there's a lot of research saying that how exercise impacts like our mental health. Sometimes just going for a walk can make a huge difference. I mean, some of that gets me into like, I'm certified in EMDR therapy and bilateral stimulation, and how like walking is kind of this natural way that we can like process and move emotion. But when you are feeling super anxious in that moment, sometimes you're paralyzed. Like the thought of like doing a walk could, if it's going to be forced, it's not going to be helpful, right? Or if you're feeling really depressed, one of the things with depression is that there's a lack of motivation. So I hear all the time from people of like I made myself take a shower today. I made myself like do my hair. Like so also know, yes, there's a place for it, but forcing it's not going to be beneficial. But yes, it is beneficial when you can create small buy-in of things, sometimes doing it together. Would you like to go for a walk? Or let's go walk the dog if you have a dog, but some sort of like kind of natural build-in versus dropping them off at the gym to do, a workout. So,
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Had another where someone said, how do you get your 19-year-old to go to the hospital if they're feeling suicidal? They're fearful to go to the hospital, right? They just don't want to go in. Are there any strategies for that?
Yeah. I think one of the things we always say is even that part of like going with someone, you could process the fears of what feels scary about it. Sometimes there's very realistic fears and sometimes there's unrealistic fears. But it's that thought of, maybe getting stuck there. I mean, it's very scary to think about like hospitalization, because I think we can go into our own mental health stigmas of like, if I'm going to the hospital, I must be crazy, right? And versus like, I'm not safe with myself. And so talking through that with them, seeing if, what if we go with you? What would you need to know before going in? Because maybe there's a list of questions and you can call and ask like, hey, I have my 19-year-old that I'm concerned and I need to bring in. These are some of the questions. What does this look like? Because sometimes knowing what protocol can look like can also manage anxiety of what they can expect when they go in and can give a framework. And if you're seriously concerned about them and they won't go in on their own, you can always call 911 and have assistance in doing that. It's not the ideal, but if it's preventing their life from being taken, it is definitely the way to go.
A couple things I was going to say about that. We haven't mentioned this in a long time, but a few years ago we did a seminar called How to Navigate a Mental Health Crisis. And it's on my website, kwarren.com, under that, How to Navigate a Mental Health Crisis. And team of professionals talking about exactly that, your loved one or yourself in an emergency, mental health emergency. And it's got forms, it's got information about what you might be asked to fill out, what should you take with you to the hospital. It's got downloadables, and then it's got this, I think it's about a 2-hour webinar that you could watch. It's really good, really helpful. If you've not actually been in a mental health crisis yet, but you're worried that you might, this is great preventative and information to have in case you should ever need it. And then what was I saying? There's also the mobile teams in certain cities in Orange County that do not necessarily don't bring law enforcement with them, because sometimes law enforcement can actually exacerbate a situation for someone who is very paranoid, anxious, whatever, and the mobile response can come in some of the cities through Be Well, that will bring somebody to come and sit on the curb and talk to you or your loved one, and it's a gentler, approach. I'm sorry?
What is it called?
Be Well. Yeah. Yeah, it's
Be Well.
Hope Van. Can't hear you, right?
Yeah.
Hope Team. Sorry, Christy. Christy, just wave your hand. Okay, maybe you might stand up just so everybody can see her. Christy works at Be Well. And so Christy really is our resident, somebody who can answer any questions specifically, but the mobile teams are great. They're not in every city in Orange County, but they are in several of the cities, and they're very helpful. They are not in Lake Forest at this time, no. But there are other teams that will come with very trained and compassionate folks who understand mental health issues.
Yeah, we can get those resources.
Yes, definitely.
That we have locally. Yeah, we have a list of
through
local
Suburban.
resources. Yep.
Absolutely. Go ahead,
Great
Todd.
question.
You had probably something else.
Yeah, that was right. We had someone here who said, I'm 17 years old. I'm a teen who doesn't live with my parents. What are some suggestions to help myself with my emotions?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say even just connecting to the local youth ministries that are here, just because they are so plugged in and have the resources there. I'm a personal fan of therapy because it really is a place that you can learn and identify what you're feeling. And so even at 17 and well, how am I going to be able to afford that? I mean, that's what the ministries are here to help you connect with resources to find that. So don't let the financial piece hold you back, but having that support and really kind of digging in to what you're experiencing will help you develop emotional language.
Yeah, and we have a minister of the day that's always on duty every day. So if you need to come in to get help to process things, you can just come right into the church office. We'll help you out. That's not a problem too. And I think too, just on a personal note, as you're trying to navigate your emotions, and all of us can do this. The app on emotions that she talked about, great one, just to be able to get vocabulary for your emotions. Remember, emotions always point to your need. Okay, and so as soon as you understand this, we talked about right brain, left brain. As soon as you look at a list to identify your emotions, you're engaging your left brain to reflect on your right brain. So you're already cutting the emotional intensity in half by just doing some of that analysis, okay? So important to get emotional vocabulary in the middle of it as well, and that would help you if you're not in a crisis, right? If you're just trying to process your emotions by yourself. But if you're in a crisis and you're flooded, please come in to the office. We're open during the day. You can come on in. We'd love to talk to you and help you process those things out.
I was just thinking of so many parents have to deal and help their kids deal with bullying. Bullying on all sorts, all varieties, all levels. Yeah. And it just feels like it's one of the hardest things to help. How do we help our children express their feelings, and what tools can we give them?
Yeah. One, I think facilitating that conversation of what they're feeling and experience with you. Sometimes kids will be very resistant to the school being, kind of called into that, but it really is the only place really to create change for them in regards to some of those school dynamics. And so I can share even from my own daughter's experience. There was like one of the situations with one of the kids, and the school counselor called me in, the vice principal called me in, and the teacher where it was happening in the class, and it was like she doesn't want to come up with a remediation plan, right? But like the remediation plan was kind of like the first step of accountability, and then if that other student breaks that contract, essentially, then there can be consequences that continue out, and so creating that conversation, really advocating for your child, saying like, I know it's really hard. I know you're scared that other kids are going to know. I know you're scared it might even make it worse. But we need to make sure that you're feeling protected and seen at school, so not only at home, but let's try to move to a place of prevention. But sometimes it is bad. I've had clients over the years, they've transferred schools because they couldn't get the support even at school. But it's such an issue that I feel like I've seen in Orange County quite a bit that schools are becoming more responsive to it. I've definitely seen in private schools they have a high no tolerance kind of policy at many of them. So,
are there some specific things though that you can say to your child that yes, there's a situation out here, but how do we fortify our kids?
Yeah. Oh, I really think pouring into them in the sense of like who you see them being, who they are, I always tell, my kids of like, I know it's hard to be picked on all the time. My daughter feels picked on all the time by certain kids in her class that just harass her, to be honest. But that part of like seeing them of like, this isn't fair, validating that it's not fair, that they don't deserve it, that they are wonderful, and it may be so hard that other people don't see that right now, but you see and like call out things in their identity of who you see them being, the way you see them being cultivated, and name those things for them, because I really look at us as like gatekeepers for our kids and the power of our words and what we speak into them. So naming parts of their identity and what is a truth perspective of who they are, and not these outside forces and words that can feel so loud when you're in that environment, and really just hit with truth of, I know this is hard, but this is not who you are, and naming who they are in response. Yeah.
That's great. Another question. How do we as parents contribute to our kids' anxiety and depression?
Everyone giggles. Why are you all laughing?
Speak for yourself.
Wow, yeah. That question makes me anxious. No.
which is a real fear, right? Especially if you've dealt with your own depression and your own anxiety. It can bring up a lot of feelings of shame of like, have I done this to my kid? I mean, that's not truth, but that's the feeling of am I responsible with the fact, like, I've been anxious my whole life. Of course you have anxiety, you know? And so I think there are a couple parts of recognizing that if shame, it is not of God. Right, and just being able to identify that as truth. The ways that we can contribute it really kind of comes back to some things we talked about today, is just being intentional about our communication, that it's not necessarily a cause, but maybe we exacerbate some things. So it really is important to allow them to feel seen. When kids ask for help getting it, like I remember a couple months ago I did an intake and I asked the 14-year-old, you know, like what was she hoping to get out of therapy? I said, your mom said that you asked for therapy, and she laughed. She said, yeah, a year ago. I was like, okay, you know? And so that sense of like, if they're asking, like respond, because it's huge that they're asking. And so being responsive when things come up, but also kind of going back to that what does your own emotional regulation look like? So I've seen parents over the years where I might have a child whose mom has dealt with depression or anxiety, but the mom has been in therapy and she's doing the things to take care of. So you're modeling like it's okay to have stuff, and we just want to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves, and like there's a knowingness that can also happen, like when you've dealt with these things that maybe other people don't get in the world because you can relate, right? So not that you're shifting the focus to you, but using that experience to empathize and connect with your kid, and modeling what it is to look like to take care of your own mental health, and then how that really is such a gift for them in taking care of their own.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think, too, the thing, too, is just not trying to fix our kids, making the outcome of fixing them my job and my role, as opposed to presence, right, walking alongside and stuff like that. Because then I'm anxious that they're not getting fixed, and then I can get into control and everything else with it, as opposed to, you know, walking with them, too. So that's good.
I had one last question from me. And it's just the general, like if you don't have, for anybody here who doesn't have an adolescent or teen or preteen in their home, but we live in a world where there is another generation. So what can we all do as adults to help the next generation with their depression, anxiety, or feeling seen, and what can we do?
Gosh, I feel like there's so many different ways to answer that question. You know, I think one in that sense of just from a very basic level of, as we have conversations in our own community, being able to name that amongst friends of like when you're hearing maybe their own children going through some things, and like sharing, not in a like you're telling them what to do kind of way of like, you know, I've heard some research about this, or I've attended some conferences and I'm kind of wondering if this is what's going on. Like when you wonder out loud with someone, it feels less intrusive, you know, and more like, have you thought about this? And creating some of that open dialogue of your own kind of friendship circle and relationships, maybe even work relationships, and advocating for them in this way. Sometimes we, and the things that we say and respond, can help reduce the mental health stigma of like, hey, listen, like depression, anxiety, it's super common, you know, and just kind of like normalizing that. And then what are maybe even ways that you could invest and give back, whether that is like in volunteering and things, creating, you know, opportunities to serve or partner with organizations as well that you're passionate about. I mean, I feel like you guys could probably testify, you always need bodies to help, right, in the hands and showing up with people for people. And so just in very practical ways, taking that and then figuring out how to steward that within your own community to really create that awareness in that next generation.
That's great. Yeah, just let's see. The only questions I've got left. Someone asked about Headspace and the resources. Is that safe for children with our Christian beliefs?
Yes.
How does that work? Yeah, that can.
Yes, absolutely. So I personally have used Headspace. I have not seen anything on there that is concerning. A lot of it is creating, there's breathing exercises in there. There might be more mindfulness things of just being aware of what's happening in your body. So there's one that's called, like, it's an SOS for in the middle of the night. So I don't know if you guys have ever dealt with this. You wake up and then you start thinking about all the things you got to do the next day, and like lo and behold, you're stuck in like this vortex of like you're like, go to sleep, stop thinking about things. So my own rule of thumb, if I'm still awake in 15 minutes, I'll throw on one of those, and it's very much just like, like you're starting at your toes and you're turning off your toes and you're switching, you know what I mean? Like you're moving, like it's very much just like getting your mind to focus on something that's kind of nothingness versus like all of the tasks that you have to do. So I haven't seen anything in there that's concerning at all. And it really is just a resource of just helping them be able to calm down and regulate. I don't see a lot of like Eastern religion influences and things like that in there.
Yeah, that's great. A couple other questions, and I can answer these. Where would you suggest an adult go? We recommended Chalk for teens. Be Well would be a great place to go in Orange County if you're an adult who's looking for help. Very just great. I know Christy could talk a little bit more to that. And then we had one more question about is there no hope for healing of mental illness, right? In terms of our faith and all those kinds of things. And I'd say there absolutely is hope, right? I mean, the Lord can heal us just like He could heal, us from any other physical issue, right? That we've seen. And but the important thing is that our faith is in Him, not in the outcomes. And I think one of the things we have to surrender is our outcomes to the Lord, right? That it's up to Him as to what's going to happen, when, where, or how. But that in this world, right, this side of heaven, we all suffer in one way or another. And in that suffering, as we walk, just like Jesus did, right, that we're here for one another. So this community right here is for those of us that are walking in this space, right? And we're dealing with this on a regular basis. And so we're here as a community together saying we're walking this walk together, trusting Jesus all the way along the way. And if He heals, awesome. That's incredible and amazing. But at the same time, we're also dealing with the reality of what we suffer with when not everybody gets healed, right? And so we're here for each other, and sometimes the healing is in the process. Sometimes the healing will be, when we see Jesus. And so we're just open about that and walking that process together. So hopefully that makes sense. All right. Well, thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us. Yes, we get good applause. Thank you so much, April. All right, a couple of things as we go. You can see on the slides here, we have our support groups that you can get involved in. We have our Family Grace and Living Grace groups for those of you that have a family member that might be living with a mental health issue, or those of you that are living with one yourself. We have our support groups, and you can get more information up there on our website. We also have a number of different ways to get involved in the mental health community. So if you'd like to do that, just write down on that little sheet on your table that you'd like to help in any way to get involved. And if you have a specific area you'd like more information on, just write that right next to your name, and we'll get all of that information to you as well. You just leave that on the table and we'll pick it up. We have the next Breathe call coming up, again with Kay. It's a free Zoom call. You can see it's coming up May 18th at 10 a.m. And so you can see more information there. Got a QR code you can scan. We'll take you right to the website. I love the fact that we can do this. You don't have to write down all those long numbers. You want to say anything about that?
Well, it's for parents.
It's for
parents.
For
parents, yeah.
Yes.
Moms and dads, kid with lives with mental health challenge.
Absolutely. Yep, for parents. And I think that's all we got. So what we have is under your chairs, we got a little thing that says you won. It's a white piece of paper, not a gum wrapper, not a piece of gum. So look under there. Oh, we got one in the back. I love how some people looked ahead of time, didn't you? You guys looked ahead of time. You came prepared. All right, we got one there and one there. Come up and see me, and I'll give this to you. And otherwise, we'll see you next month. Good. Thanks for coming, you guys.